Hi, everybody. It's the WaitingForNextYear.com podcast. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, via Periscope, and YouTube. I'm going to get this down one of these days. Some of you are listening on the audio feed, and that's awesome. We have a new guest for the first time. You might know him from the pages of Waiting for Next Year. Mitch.
Hey.
How's it going? How the hell are you?
I'm okay. How you doing, Craig?
Nice. Good. It's always funny to greet each other when we've actually been talking for about 10 minutes now.
That's right.
But the things we do, it's show business, right?
That's right. It's all part of the industry. We all do it.
Yeah. So opening question. I told you I was going to ask you this. Who the hell are you?
Who am I?
Yeah. Who is Mitch? Because people have read your stuff, presumably, but you've never been on the podcast. They see your name, but that doesn't really tell them that much about you. So give everybody the 1 minute version of who in the heck is Mitch.
Well, I'm the consummate Clevelander, right? I grew up in Cleveland. I moved away at 18, lived in Chicago for a few years, and moved back. Biggest baseball fan, I've been reading baseball stuff since I was 5 years old, and it's really part of my identity. I think that's where I fit in on Waiting for Next Year. I love writing about baseball music. Yeah, I watch a lot of movies. That's a pretty boring answer. I'm a pretty boring guy, I guess.
No, I mean there's a baseball type, and you fit in with that type. It's guys, and Andrew and I were talking about it on the last podcast. It's guys like you. I think the first one at the site was John Steiner. Guys like you come in and talk about baseball in such a way that we're like, we kind of talk from the fan opinion. That was always our niche, and guys like you kind of came into Waiting for Next Year and changed the game and changed the way we talked about it. Hattery, Steiner, and I'm missing a bunch of names in between.
Yeah, no, it's tricky because I still am a fan. And it's like this weird balance, right, between my rooting interest as an Indians fan, but also trying to see things objectively. It's hard. I still turn off Indians games when they're losing 7-1 in the 8th inning because it's hard to watch. I'll turn on a different game, but yeah, no, it's been tough, man. It's been tough.
Well, and we'll certainly get into the Indians as they're playing right now. They are kind of unwatchable. So I mean, if we could have had a little bit of disappointment and nothing off the field, no distractions, that would have been fine. But to kind of have both, I mean, I guess they do kind of go hand in hand, don't they?
They do. It seems that way, right? It's like the teams that have good chemistry, the teams that you hear about their clubhouse chemistry are the teams that do well, and the team, and when you hear about bad clubhouse chemistry, it's the teams that are doing poorly. People talk about it like it's some sort of causative thing where, the good chemistry is why they're winning. But no, they're all happy because they're winning, and that's why they have good chemistry. So, yeah, they go hand in hand.
So where did you come out on kind of the Indians' own little COVID controversy with Plesac and Clevenger? Because I wouldn't say shocked and appalled, but I was disappointed, and I thought it was a bad thing. I think but at a certain point, I think it gets overblown. I think that, it's a contest to see how outraged you can be over this thing. And it becomes performative. And I thought it was a bad look by Plesac today to be so defensive and to scream about the media. But at the same time, I kind of get where he's coming from. If I was in his spot, I'd be like, I mean, I'm a 25-year-old guy, and I was out past 10. Get a hold of yourselves.
Yeah, it's hard. He's obviously in the wrong, and Clevenger even more so, clearly. And and he's talking about the CDC guidelines and how they all followed that, and that's great. I'm glad he's following CDC guidelines. At the end of the day, though, his employer instituted rules about how to conduct yourself that have nothing to do with the CDC guidelines, and he didn't follow them. And and he's getting punished appropriately, and Clevenger even more so because he lied to the team. But I'm with you. I think part of it is the fact that we have so much access to information and each other these days that it's like, you hear someone else's take and you have to add on to that take, and it kind of builds on each other to the extent that, you hear people saying that, they belong suspended for a long time, the rest of the season. And it's just like, all right, he made a mistake. And he probably isn't helping his cause by releasing videos like that. If I'm Plesac or Clevenger, I am keeping my mouth shut. I am following the rules. I am following the rules 110% and making it very obvious that I am doing so.
Well, and he didn't explain himself very well, and he led with the part where he was defensive, which is bad. It's bad narrative construction, Mr. Plesac. But he didn't.
He's not ready for waiting for next year.
I know, right? He didn't once argue that he said it was a good decision to make him quarantine. He didn't complain about being punished. It was just like he's not a seasoned professional when it comes to communicating. But like when I don't know if it was Keith Olbermann or somebody else pointed out he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I'm an insurance agent, and I think he should have been wearing a seatbelt. I always wear my seatbelt, but like, we're trying a little bit too hard to rake this guy over the coals.
Yeah, right. There are so many athletes that record like video while they're driving. It's insane.
I might know somebody who occasionally records a podcast while driving. It's happened. I don't know.
Shall they remain nameless, Craig?
It's just like talking on a speakerphone, I don't know.
No, you're right. The video is where it's like, it's a little weird. Like when your eyes leave the road, you're like 10-2, Mr. Plesac, 10-2.
All right. Well, hopefully it's just kind of over now, but I don't know. And maybe this is one of those famous times over the years where we're on the podcast. We are like, yeah, maybe it's just time to log off of Twitter.
Yeah, I think so. It's never a bad idea, right?
No. So beyond the stuff that only matters tangentially to what's happening on the field, what's your take on where the Indians are now versus where they should be or could be? That's number one. And number two, do you think any of it has to do with the little medical hiatus that Terry Francona's been on?
Well, there's no question it's been frustrating where they are right now, especially seeing as how good the pitching's been. I mean, it's been unbelievable. They didn't give up more than 4 runs in a game until, the first game against the Cubs. So that was something like 17 games in a row. They have to have a better record than they did. I think they were 10-7 going into that. So that's very frustrating. And the offense is pretty inexplicably bad right now. Lindor hasn't really been Lindor for over a year now. And Jose Ramirez is hitting, which is great, but no one else is really Cesar Hernandez. But you need the bats to break out. And my true honest opinion of the matter is that guys go through hot streaks and guys go through cold streaks, and it's unfortunate that they are all going through a cold streak at once while the pitching is so good. I don't know that Terry Francona being there makes that big of a difference. But generally speaking, I'm so mystified at the role of managers. That's one of my biggest questions about baseball that we still have is what is a manager's role. So I think it's really hard to say. I think of a manager a lot as, or in the context of like a normal workplace, right? I mean, how important is the office environment, the work environment in a normal non-baseball workplace? We talk about it constantly, and yet all the discourse around managers is just, are they calling for the sacrifice bunt? Are they putting the lineup in order? And I think so much more of their job is about clubhouse culture. So it's really hard to say if it's mattering or not.
I tend to agree. And I think Terry Francona is different, is a different person to different people based on what they need. Like, I know Corey Kluber's no longer here, but you can't imagine a scenario where Corey Kluber needed like a lot of hand holding and TLC. Like, but at the same time, you've got to think that he was instrumental in sticking with Jose Ramirez and through all the struggles last season. And he was also instrumental in the front office finally making a move and trading Trevor Bauer last year after he threw the ball over the wall, you know? Mm-hmm. So I think he probably treated Trevor Bauer far differently than he did Cookie Carrasco, you know? I think those certain managers can understand the dynamics of different position units, different individuals within those position units. And it's impossible to be everything to everybody, but the best managers are kind of like Play-Doh, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's really all about putting your players, or outside of the baseball context, putting your employees in the best position to succeed, right? So I think, Terry Francona gets a lot of flack because the Indians sacrifice bunt a lot. And I don't even know if that's him or if he's just like, hey, if it makes you happy, players sacrifice bunt.
As the Dairy Bros say, bunting is for losers.
That's right. Like Alex Centrone. Did you hear about that? Did you see that quote? Oh my gosh. Did you see the brawl between the A's and the Astros?
I loved it.
Right? It's so entertaining. But no.
It was like the perfect level of vitriol, no actual blood or injury. Mm-hmm. It's my perfect baseball fight.
That's right. And unfortunately, it happened during a time when we're supposed to not make contact with each other. But when asked if Ramon Laureano regretted going after Alex Centrone, the Astros hitting coach, he said, yes, I regret it because he's a loser. And it's like, so good.
It's such a kindergarten comeback. I love it.
It is. The amount of trash talk this year in baseball has been excellent between Joe Kelly, Ramon Laureano, the Clevenger, Bauer back and forth. It's really been something.
Yeah. Well, and everything, the Astros versus the world has been wonderful.
It really has. And so far the world's winning. I think the Astros are like, 7-10 or something like that.
So what are it's a kind of a hack question, but like, can this team turn it around? I mean, is it just a matter, this team has always started slow. They certainly can't afford to start slow in a short season. But can they turn it around? How bad are you feeling right now?
Well, all things considered, they're still in fine playoff potential. They're still fine to make the playoffs. They're 10-9, and there's a 16-team playoff this year. So if the season ended right now, they're in the playoffs, I believe, or they're right in the thick of it. And the offense has been as bad as possible, right? I mean, it really, I'll eat my words saying this, but it really can't get worse. So part of me is confident that doing nothing except, calming down. Lindor really needs to stop pressing at the plate because it is very obvious that he's pressing way too hard. But I really don't think it can get much worse offensively. The problem is I also don't think it can get much better pitching wise. So hopefully the pitching goes down a little bit as the offense goes up. I think they absolutely can turn it around. Santana is walking like crazy, but he's not hitting at all. That's going to change. Franmil Reyes is starting to figure it out. We're getting Tyler Naquin back. And I've never been a big Tyler Naquin fan, but
he's always felt to me, again, like the Dairy brothers say, like a 4A, kind of a 4A outfielder.
Yeah, he can't field, but he's a league. He's a real major league hitter. He's a high BABIP guy, a high batting average on balls in play guy, which means he hits a lot of hard line drives, which is sorely lacking on this team right now.
And what the idea is, if you're a high BABIP guy, that means that like you're going to make your own luck.
Yeah, a high BABIP guy it just means when you put the ball in play, you've got a higher chance of reaching base, right? And it is because his batted ball profile is one that is mostly line drives and hard hit. He's not going to be a big power guy, but the way this team's going, like the fact that he's a high BABIP guy means that as long as he's putting the ball in play, he's getting on base a fair amount, and the team just like not getting on base right now. So I think
if he was like 17 or 18 years old and he was working his way up through the system, would they be talking to him about changing his launch angle?
Very possibly. He's got wacky mechanics. It just depends on how successful he was, right? Like if he's hitting like 350, 360 at every level, they're not.
Well, I just felt like that's a good point. I just felt like that launch angle was the same, had become kind of like what Steph Curry did to the 3-pointer in the NBA, where we got to shoot 100 threes a game. We just have to. And we got to have that launch angle and that's why we have so many home runs or strikeouts. Right.
Yeah. Teams have realized that home runs are the most efficient way to score runs, and you can afford to strike out if you're hitting home runs. But home runs come in a lot of different ways. We actually had this conversation on the WFNY Slack channel pretty recently. If you're hitting lots of fly balls, if you're pulling lots of fly balls, that's a good ticket for home runs. But if you're big and strong and you can hit the ball the other way, or a lot of your fly balls turn into home runs, then you don't need to work on hitting as many fly balls or pulling as many fly balls. You can do it comes more natural. So it really just depends. But with Tyler Naquin, I think
he likes inside the Parkers.
He does. No, he's real. That's his best skill.
This is right.
His best skill is inside the park home runs and making wacky end of game catches that are, easy to turn to.
And hating his nickname Baquin.
Is that his nickname?
I've heard.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna call, if I ever meet him, I'm gonna call him that to his face and see how he responds.
I will.
Don't do it. Don't do
it. So yeah, the most surprising one to me, just because obviously Lindor's a surprise too, but the biggest surprise that for me has been Franmil Reyes. Like I just kind of assumed he was going to be steady beginning to end, and he's been very, very streaky in little spurts here and there.
Yeah, no, and he wasn't like a huge prospect coming up. He kind of just broke into the scene in the major leagues, and he's had good success, but he's never been a star hitter in the major leagues, and the Indians are hoping he can put it together and find that consistency. But he's a real power threat in the middle of the lineup, and that's something that the Indians, haven't really had in a long time, and that's really nice. I guess Napoli was kind of that, but not in the same way. Since Thome, really, right? Yeah, Hafner.
The dude they got from Toronto, Encarnacion, kind of.
Oh, you're right.
He's so in and out.
He was
he never felt like he was here. Something about, and I liked him. I'm not knocking him or slamming him. He just never felt like he was part of the team.
Yeah. Well, the Indians have had kind of bad luck with signing these guys. Their strategy on the free agent market, it seems like, is to sign guys whose price has dropped, which it turns out there's a reason their price has dropped. Like I'm thinking Swisher, I'm thinking Bourne, I'm thinking Encarnacion. Like all these guys signed with the Indians and immediately like hit the decline button on their career.
Well, my favorite, and I brought this up before, so broken record time, but they couldn't possibly afford Santana until they traded to get him back on the contract that they didn't want to sign him to.
Right. I mean, they essentially traded 1 year of Encarnacion for 2 years of Santana because they had
did it always have to go that way because of the timing?
What do you mean? Like it always had to? They couldn't have both of those guys on the team,
right? I mean, it almost seems like it was one for the other. I'm sorry. I'm talking all over you.
No, it's my fault. They also are just very overlapping in terms of their abilities on the field. I mean, Santana's a better fielder. Encarnacion was a better hitter when he was on Toronto, But as long as when he came on the Indians, he declined pretty quickly, and they were like, "Hey, let's try the Santana guy again." They basically bought him low because he was struggling so much in Philly, and that was a great move.
Yeah, I certainly loved it. I loved getting him back.
He's a likable guy.
So were you always baseball first? Is that kind of how it went? Did you flirt with the other sports, or were they just kind of afterthoughts?
No, I grew up loving football as well. Baseball was always my love. I was the kid who was reading baseball books in elementary school, and kids made fun of me for being obsessed with baseball.
When you're just enough younger than me that the baseball books were better.
Yeah, that's right. Well, but the problem is when I read those baseball books and I was like, my mind is blown by like all these cool statistics, and I learn about them. It's like the way I think about baseball now, and I get up to the age where I can start producing things, and now everyone thinks that way. And the real talents are the ones who can code and the ones who have a deep, profound knowledge of statistics. And that's just not my training. So it's more for me using those analytics that I know that are maybe, first generation or second generation sabermetrics, and using them for opinion pieces rather than being able to do cutting edge analysis that teams might want. But
and despite, the adoption of the stats and the way of thinking about baseball, there are still only so many people talking that language in each market. And the Cleveland not being the biggest baseball town in the world, you're never going to be competing with more than 3, maybe 5 people who are talking that language.
Hey, I'll take it.
Yeah.
No, but it's fun. It's fun, like knowing all of the guys who do that. I mean, we all kind of have like a little Twitter band, and we go back and forth, pretty much just feeding each other's egos. So that's fun. No, but to answer your original question, I grew up actually going to all the Browns games. I was lucky enough to have a family member with season tickets, and so I went to every Browns game from age like 6 to 18. I think I saw about 30 wins.
And what year was your first in-person Browns game?
My first Browns game ever was the Dwayne Rudd helmet throw. I don't know if you remember that. I think that was 2002.
It was what, like a Thursday night?
I think it was a Sunday.
Was it? Okay.
I think it was just a Sunday afternoon game. But no, yeah. Basically, the game ended in absolute heartbreak when Dwayne Rudd threw his helmet before the play ended, putting I believe the Chiefs in field goal range.
It was the 2002 season opener. I knew it was a season opener, and that was the ultimate kick. Like, not only did it happen, the Browns could have gotten off to a good start, if not for one of the weirdest, most improbable penalties that had absolutely nothing to do with what happened on the field.
That's right. And I'd like to say it went uphill from there, but that would be a lie.
Yeah.
It did not go uphill from there. Not fun. But
and he was a pretty good player too.
Yeah, it's a shame that's what he will go on without. In Cleveland, we will all remember Dwayne Rudd as the knucklehead who threw his helmet.
Oh, it's just gut wrenching. So that was your first game. Way to get it started.
Yeah, that's right. That was my initiation into Cleveland fandom. Some people were born or grew into it when the Browns left Cleveland. I never knew the old Browns. I've only known the new Browns, and it is a disaster.
I started watching in 86 or 87, but I was pretty little, so I didn't totally get it. But then by the time they left town, it was pretty gut wrenching. It's just a totally different era. So, like, what does Bernie Kosar mean to you?
Bernie Kosar is the kooky guy in the pregame for me. I mean,
it's so funny.
You know what? He actually is. The Bernie Kosar highlight that I've probably seen the most times in my life is losing the Doug Flutie Hail Mary game. That's actually what he is.
And so then, all right, well, now we're just gonna jump around on that. So 2002, what was the Indians team in 2002?
Okay, the Indians team in 2002, that was the final year of Jim Thome in Cleveland.
Okay.
And he hit 52 homers. The team was mediocre. They were kind of coming down from the high of the 90s, and they let him walk. I was 8 years old. I cried when I heard on the bus ride home that they had let him walk, and my family still tells me about how much I cried when Jim Thome left. It's one of those things that I'll never live down in their eyes. Yeah, and then after that, there was just like the dark years with the Charlie Manuel teams. Didn't realize how good of a coach or a good of a manager he was until he went to Philly and won a World Series with them.
Yeah. So then we have a cat.
Yes, loud cat. She's actually quite obnoxious. We might hear her a lot. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So I was mad. I was old enough to be mad about Jim Thome leaving. And I certainly blame the Indians some, but I also blame Jim Thome for how he handled it. I'm team shouldn't have a statue, team no statue. Are you team statue for Jim Thome?
He was like my first baseball love. Yeah, I'm pro statue only because, he was like my childhood hero. But it's so funny how we think about those things then and versus now. Back then we were like, oh, that greedy guy. And now it's like, hey, he's allowed to make a living, It's just like crazy how much fan sentiment has changed in 20 years.
I don't think it's changed that much around baseball.
No?
Because I think the money is so insane in baseball because there's no salary cap. It's either you're making 22 or 27. And the difference between 22 million and 27 million is still more than you can ever spend in a lifetime. Like versus in football, you got the short careers. You've got my prime example is Antonio Gates, who was practically, I don't know if he was undrafted, but practically undrafted out of Kent State. He turns into a Pro Bowl tight end. He was making league minimum practically, and he could not afford the risk of walking out onto that field. He had to hold out. And everybody understood it. But a baseball player, nobody would ever understand a baseball player holding out.
Right. That's true, especially for a veteran like Thome. I mean, the tricky thing with baseball is that the service time is so manipulated and it takes so long for players to earn that paycheck. That's why we see guys like Kyler Murray choosing the NFL over MLB because in the NFL, he can get drafted and make millions of dollars instantly. But yeah, no, I'm with you in some regard that, these guys make so much money. It's crazy. And it just, the more money they make, the greater the divide is between the small market teams and the large market teams, which, who knows how much money the Indians actually have coming in, but because no baseball team will disclose that information. But the fact is they don't have the spending power that most other teams do have. So,
and they're economically when you get to, if you're talking about $100 million contract versus $130 million contract, mm-hmm. That's not the same thing as like someday if you and I are talking about a salary that's either, you can either make $100,000 in this job or $130,000 in this job. That's a meaningful lifestyle difference for any American. Mm-hmm. But 100 million and 130 million, even though it's like, that's 30 million, that's a huge difference. It's so far and away above the amount of money anybody could ever possibly spend or need that it kind of doesn't really matter. And that's baseball is the only sport other than like international soccer that's like that.
Well, yeah. Well, the other thing about baseball compared to the other sports is that the other sports, especially for the stars, you have so much money outside of your salary too. In baseball, it's like just the way it is. There isn't that much endorsement money coming in. So in
get that Mr. Hero contract, right?
That's right. Ryan Howard, Subway. No, I there's also lots of things we don't consider. I'd read a great piece on Baseball Prospectus by, I believe, Rob Maines recently, just discussing the difference between Mookie Betts and Mike Trout's contracts, and discussing, the differences in like taxes. Like Mike Trout lives in California, so he has to pay far greater taxes than Mookie Betts does, who lives in Tennessee. So there's so much stuff that we, as a public, don't really even consider. It's just hard. I think we have so much information that it's really hard to stifle ourselves from speaking out on players' financial situations, when the reality is we don't really know. We don't know their personal finances, and they have every right to keep that private. It's just hard because we as fans want our team to sign good players, right? So it's a hard thing to balance.
Yeah, no, and I do think, and by the same token, I can be critical of a player and also be critical of ownership with exploding franchise values. I get into that argument with people all the time about the difference between asset appreciation and cash flow. And, I'm a finance dork because I studied it in college and use it every day, all the time. And it drives me crazy. And I know that it's shades of gray, that it's somewhere in the middle, but it feels like it's all cash flow with our ownership group.
Yeah. School me on that. So with the cash flow thing, they can say that they don't have any money coming in, but they can spend all of their incoming cash on stadium renovations, upgrading the concessions and whatever. And then they can say, well, we don't have any money, right? Is that right? Did I get that right?
Kind of, yeah. And it's hard to spend asset appreciation unless you bring in an investor. So like you bought the team for $1 billion, it appreciates to $2 billion, and then you bring in an investor at 30%, that's $300 million. So, or no, whatever. I didn't do the math right.
I think it's 600.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. It'd be 300 million at $1 billion, but by the time it's appreciated, then you've doubled the amount that somebody comes in. Right. And then all of a sudden you have all this money to invest back into the team or the minor league program or the stadium or whatever. And the Indians are like, they're just watching that stock go up. They're not really doing anything to take advantage of that stock going up. And they're going, well, our TV deal is what it is. And the ticket sales, you guys don't buy tickets. And if we could sell some more luxury suites. And it's like, you're running the business the wrong way. You're missing the boat. You're being purposefully unsophisticated when it comes to finance and running an asset appreciation business. It's like when the reverse of that is like these giant hedge funds that come in, and this is what happened to Toys R Us. So like, we're going to buy Toys R Us for $1 billion. And then we're gonna refinance it with a bunch of banks, and we're gonna pull all the cash out, and then it's gonna go bankrupt because they're not gonna be able to afford the notes on the loans. But meanwhile, we pulled out $800 million in cash, and it's like it's just robber baron type stuff. And I'm not suggesting the Dolans should do that, but maybe robber baron 10% a year.
Yeah, right. There's nothing that bugs me more than the fan shaming. I mean, it's so terrible because you look at the TV market numbers, and the Indians have the number one TV ratings in the entire league. And yet, you complain about people not wanting to show up. And it's like, I mean, hey, like clearly people are interested. This is not on the fans. Come on.
Yeah. It's the only business where the customer's not always right, or you're allowed to criticize the customer and take local tax money to fix your stadiums or whatever. But I don't want to go down that whole road.
Sure.
So we are at about 35 minutes. You and I had talked, and this is where I talk about my failings as a podcast host. We had talked about doing some Mad Men stuff. And I was going to rewatch, and I got about 3 episodes in, and I just couldn't do it. I'm not a rewatch guy. I found something out about myself. I'm not a TV rewatch guy. I rewatch movies, but I don't know that I couldn't bear, even as much as I love Mad Men, and I couldn't bear the thought of going through the entire thing over again.
Is it that you remembered it too well?
It was partially that. And even if the parts that I didn't remember well, I kind of felt like, well, I know how it ends. I know the beats. So I don't have one of those perfect memories where I don't remember any dialogue from the show.
Oh, me neither. I'm awful.
Stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, if I remember even a little bit, it's too much.
Interesting. No, Mad Men's like, you hear about people in my generation watching The Office over and over again. Mad Men's kind of like that for me. It's like, at this point, it's become like my comfort food. Like, oh, I need to go to sleep, or I don't feel like watching a whole episode of something. I'll just throw on an episode of Mad Men.
It's a perfect tone.
It really is. And it's so it's so entertaining once you get to know the characters. You can engage with it on a super deep level, or you can engage with it on a just a, oh, what are you doing? Kind of like a talking at this movie screen kind of way. Yeah, it's my favorite show of all time. I don't blame you for not being able to rewatch it or anything like that. Who am I to blame you? But no, that's I could talk for hours about Mad Men, so I'm going to stop talking about it now.
It's a definite top 10. I mean, it's certainly one of the best shows I've ever watched. I mean, it's just the writing, the performances. I mean, the actors that they found and that have come out of that show, that's always the hallmark of a great show, is when the actors come out of it. And you're like, I can't believe how many people were in the show.
Right. And the thing that always gets me is just how dynamic the characters are and how realistically they grow and change throughout the show. I mean, spoilers, Pete Campbell is like the famous, like sniveling, like twerp in the beginning of the show, that everyone hates. And Pete Campbell has this reputation as this hated character. But by the end of the show, like, I like Pete Campbell. Like, he's a reasonable guy. He's like clearly learned from all of his mistakes, or not all, but he's learned from a lot of his mistakes. And that is just so true to life. It's so commendable, to have these characters that grow from their experiences. And I just don't think you see that very often in TV.
He really did find himself. Like the character found himself. And if you go back, and I did obviously watch the first 3 episodes, and I had forgotten just how hateable he was.
Ugh, the worst. Yeah, no, in the first episode, Don completely just like, destroys him. Not physically. Lane Price will do that later. But no, verbally just owns him. And it's such a fist pump moment for the viewer. It's like, 7 seasons later, he's lost his hair and he has gained some perspective, and he's actually a likable human being, and it's awesome.
But yeah, you're right. The comeuppance he got, it was instant gratification to begin the season, and it set the tone for Don too. It was really cool.
It really did. What are you watching now, Craig?
So I am watching Working Moms, which is a Netflix show. It's really funny. Every episode is 22 minutes long. It's the perfect speed right now. And my wife and I are kind of plowing through it. And then we built the home theater. And so I've been watching a lot of movies with the kids, a lot of big monster movies like Pacific Rim, the Godzilla reboot. We started watching War of the Worlds, and I was talking to Andrew about it on the last podcast. And then after the podcast, I went out, and come to find out they had to turn it off because War of the Worlds was too creepy for my 7, soon to be 8-year-old. So they had to turn it off.
The Tom Cruise?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not the Orson Welles. You were
No.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have guessed that War of the Worlds would be the creepy one, I guess. I don't know. I've never seen Cloverfield.
The violence was too realistic for him.
Okay, I could see that. Yeah, Godzilla is not particularly
No.
scary. The one that I want to see is Cloverfield. I've actually never seen it.
I saw Cloverfield in the theater and I had to walk out and close my eyes for 5 minutes because I got motion sickness.
Oh, shaky cam?
Yep, but I love that universe. I've seen there are a couple other movies that kind of came out of that universe. And I think it's great.
Yeah, no, I've been wanting to watch that one, and I want to watch the John Goodman one a lot too.
The John Goodman one is really good. And
yeah,
I don't know if I'm remembering all this correctly, but I don't think you have to watch the regular Cloverfield to watch 10 Cloverfield Lane or whatever.
Maybe I'll watch that one first.
Yeah. No, it's really good stuff. All right. Last but not least, music. You fit in very well with our behind the scenes music conversations. How did you come to, did you have like an older sibling, a college roommate? For me, it was a college roommate. I came to college with like the grunge and like a bit of metal and hardcore, and I got all the indie rock from my college friends.
Yeah, so I kind of had a similar music upbringing, not same genre, but I had a similar experience, right? My music journey has been wild. Growing up, I listened to exclusively show tunes until I was like in 6th or 7th grade. Now I don't listen to show tunes at all, but that was kind of where I was coming from. I listened to a lot of classic rock in high school, but my two big things were when my dad introduced me to his vinyl record collection from when he was a kid. I still collect them. I got them right over there, actually. I got there's a bottom shelf over there. Yeah. And my record player is right. I don't know if you can see it by the, yeah. So that was one of the two big things was when I learned about vinyl records. And then the other thing was the college roommate, right? I'd only listened to like classic rock radio, WNCX 98.5. And then I think my friend Nolan showed me Sufjan Stevens' Illinois record. And I really fell in love with that. He also showed me Kanye West's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And that was
That's a couple launching points.
Yeah, like I'd say that's a good start for indie rock and rap music, respectively. So yeah, and now it's just like, you know, I'm constantly like looking for new music to the extent that it's kind of a detriment. I should probably like listen to the stuff that I know and like more than I do.
It can be overwhelming in this time period. For me, and I got to college, and a guy that I became friends with who lived across the hall, he was like, it was Mineral, Christie Front Drive, and Modest Mouse. And those three, and it was the Fruit That Ate Itself, Modest Mouse, the fruit that ate itself. So it was like that dirty, like kind of not real melodic version of Modest Mouse. And that was my launch pad. And in those days, I can't remember what the store was called, but it was the equivalent of Record Exchange in Boston. And I was just like combing through the genre, the indie alternative genre, and you'd buy like 6-7 CDs at $2 or $3 a piece and just check them out, you know? And that's how I discovered the Melvins and all these different bands. And so yeah, college was that great discovery. And then somewhere between my freshman and sophomore year is when the file sharing started happening, and you could just sample anything and everything in the universe.
It's overwhelming. There's too much. It's like, it's so funny because we've kind of come full circle to the extent that like people want their stuff to be curated. We want Spotify playlists and stuff because there's just too much. Like, how do you know what to listen to now?
That's why anybody would be lucky enough to subscribe to the music channel in Slack waiting for next year.
That's right. Yeah. We should really make that public.
And Andrew kills it. He and I have been friends long enough, and we know each other's tastes well enough that he knows when he hears something that it's going to be exactly what I want to listen to, and vice versa.
Yeah, I'm almost a little intimidated to like post stuff on there. I posted the new Sufjan song today without any caption or comment or anything like that. And that was, I think, the first music I've shared on there in a little while, because you guys just like have this language, and you guys both grew up kind of liking the same kind of music, right?
And we're almost exactly the same age, Andrew and I. So it's like, you just talk about the commonality of experience. You know, it's not only the same type of experience, it's the same bands, almost exactly, except Andrew's knowledge is like much wider. He gobbled up far more than I ever did. So
yeah, no, was the Modest Mouse record, to go back to that, was that pre-Lonesome Crowded West? I think that's the first one I've listened to.
I think so. I need to look up the discography, but it's like, it was the first time it's probably not the first time I ever heard it, but the first time I ever realized that somebody recorded a guitar and just reversed the sound. A guitar in reverse. Now they have pedals that do it, you know, like my delay pedal will do it now. But I think you had to do some tape trickery to do that kind of thing back in those days. And it was like nothing I'd ever heard. I'm not sure. I'm sure he wasn't the first one to do all of those things, but it was my first time hearing any of it. And so it was just kind of mind blowing. Like growing up with the metal and the hardcore, it was like I'd seen all the boundaries you could push with like anger and noise, but this was like arty noise.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting thing that I'd never thought about too, with like the advent of technology in music. I think about it so much in like science fiction movies, right? Like the effect, if you watch the original Star Wars, I mean, it's great, but it looks ridiculous compared to the movies now. And at the time it was super impressive. And it's kind of the same, you know, when you think about it, like listen to an old Beatles record, like, you know, Tomorrow Never Knows or whatever. And it sounds like, you know, like anyone can do this now. You can do this on Bandcamp on your, you know, computer. But back then it's like mind blowing crazy. And I think you have to consider those things.
All right. So The Fruit That Ate Itself is an EP that came out in 97.
Mm-hmm.
And then The Lonesome Crowded West also came out in 97. So I don't know which one came. I don't know which one came out.
We're in the same era. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's I love that record, The Lonesome Crowded West. That's an awesome one.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course he went really interesting directions. I mean, by the time he gets to Good News for People Who Love Bad News, it's just like a totally different band, totally different sound, and just accessible. He was very inaccessible prior to that. So just for the people who don't know you and don't know your taste, like I'm not going to ask you for an actual top 5, but like name 4 or 5 of, like, obviously Sufjan is up there, some of your favorite bands, so that people get a sense of what you care about.
Let's see. I that's so hard because it's always changing.
Like, are you a Radiohead guy?
I do like Radiohead. I wouldn't say I'm like the biggest Radiohead fan, but I like the Radiohead classics. My favorite Radiohead album's In Rainbows, if that says anything about me. But I would say my favorite bands, or the bands that I listen to right now, the 2 that I've been listening to the most lately are Big Thief, whom I actually wrote about one of their songs for Waiting for Next Year earlier this year.
Yeah, it's a great song.
It's a really great song, right? And I also listen to a lot of Waxahachie, which is a band by Katie Crutchfield. I think she's a Philadelphian, and she just like plays a lot of like, you know, bedroom rock, indie rock kind of thing, very confessing lyrics, and, you know, writes very personal things. And that's kind of what I'm into. My favorite bands, like when I was getting into music for the first time, Sufjan, Arcade Fire, that Funeral album's phenomenal. Black Keys. My first concert was in high school. I saw the Black Keys at the Q touring El Camino, and that was amazing. Mitski is one of my favorites right now. All right, that's enough artists.
No, it's good. It's good. Yeah, no, It's fun. This is going to be useful for a lot of people who who know your writing. Now they if they watch, they've got a face to go with the name, and if they're listening, they've got a voice to go with it. And so let's do this again sometime. It's been fun.
Yeah, this was fun. I enjoyed this a lot.
So yeah, I guess we'll stop there. I want to thank everybody for listening, wherever you were listening or watching. It's to the point where we're really starting to ramp this up. We've been doing a lot of episodes, so tell a friend, do that review thing. I don't know how to do all those plugs that all the other podcast hosts do. Yeah. Leave a rating, leave a review, iTunes,
wherever
Spotify.
you get your podcasts.
Right. and then we should do like a mattress read or something. All right. Well, thanks again, Mitch.
Hey, it was fun. Thanks for having me, Craig.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.